Power armor training is something of a hot topic. Smaller in comparison to, say, the Fusion Core, but a bit of a buzz among the fandom regardless. It was brought into the series in Fallout 3, stayed for New Vegas, and was dropped in Fallout 4. There's arguments for and against it. Should Bethesda bring back power armor training? So this is a bit of a short video, but I wanted to talk about power armor training. As stated, Fallout 3 was the very first Fallout game to actually have power armor training be a requirement. Prior to this, in the original Fallout and Fallout 2, if you found a set, you threw it on your protagonist and enjoyed the benefits it had to offer. The incredibly high damage resistance and strength buffs. Fallout 3 brought it into picture for, most likely, a balance reason. The Brotherhood of Steel and the Enclave are very important to the plot, so they're kind of flooded in numbers. It's quite easy to stumble upon a set pretty early on. For a lone wanderer that wanders around lonely-like, there's a handful of places where one could come across the Brotherhood, Outcasts, and even a random Enclave spawn pretty well in the beginning of the game. So getting a set pretty much out the gate is entirely possible. Particularly the Outcasts, as there's no serious repercussions for taking them out and slapping on some T45. So balance is probably the reason over lore. Keep in mind, every companion capable of wearing armor can wear power armor just fine. That all being said, the point where you get power armor training in Fallout 3's main story is pretty much shortly after the Enclave arrives. Still, New Vegas continued to use the power armor training despite the more spread out and rare replacement of power armor. Then came Fallout 4 and it was removed. Some suggest from a lore standpoint, since Nate was in the military, he was trained to use it, as people keep reminding me in my Bethesda ruined power armor video. Thing is, that's an assumption that I personally don't see having a lot of weight. Just being in the military doesn't necessarily mean he's trained to use it. If he was assigned a set of power armor, then sure. But we see in the flashbacks of his past, from the very intro of the game, he was using combat armor rather than power armor. He might be trained to use it, he might not. 76 has a basic training camp and power armor isn't part of that program. There's no confirmation one way or the other. Simply speculation with little information other than he was in the military. Regardless, power armor training doesn't exist as a mechanic in Fallout 4 or 76. So, what are the reasons to have it, and what are the reasons not to have it? Reasons not to have it. Number 1. Redundancy. Under the current mechanics, fusion cores are supposed to be the balance. In theory, you can't use it so often because the finite battery exists. Power armor training isn't the limiter anymore. It's the juice that the power armor runs on. That would make training fairly redundant in purpose. Why have two different forms of balance? That said, you can get pretty loaded in fusion cores to the point where the intended balance has little to no effect. And truth be told, Bethesda seems to really want players to get a suit pretty quickly, judging from how early it was introduced in Fallout 4. Number 2, lore reasoning. So despite Fallout 3 introducing it, it was never really a huge requirement for lore prior. Indeed, the Vault Dweller and the Chosen One could just throw on a set as early as possible. And despite some headcanon, there's no bit of dialogue that suggested that the Vault Dweller or the Chosen One ever received training from the Brotherhood or the Enclave. The truth is, the Chosen One, a tribal with little understanding of technology prior to be sending out on his quest, could grab a set from Mariposa or buy some off a vendor in San Francisco. In that sense, 4's lack of power armor training is actually closer to the original interpretation. So why have power armor training? Number 1, value. Power armor is the height of armor defense in this franchise. It's what gets slapped on the cover art. It's what most players associate with the franchise. It's what got the most views on my channel. It's power armor, an expensive piece of army issue equipment. Highly advanced, the pinnacle of pre-war military technology. And in essence, power armor training makes the highest tier of armor feel that much more valuable. You can't just use it unless you got that perk. It's a membership for an exclusive club. Not just any rando can use it. In 3 New Vegas, you got this training through the Brotherhood of Steel, Enclave Remnants, a battle simulator that didn't get a full release before the war, or getting to the end of 3's main quest without training. Having this perk tied to a specific quest or just requirements does make getting power armor feel like a reward. You have to earn it to use it. Number 2, lore reasoning. Weird, right? This again? Well, it might be a retcon that got retcon. At one point, power armor training was a requirement. It was justified in lore, with quotes that tell you just how difficult it was to use it. So much so that the NCR said screw it and just ripped out all the complicated bits and had some of their troopers just wear the plating.
They have the best equipment the NCR can get its hands on. Power armor salvaged from our war with the Brotherhood. Techs strip out the joint servos so you don't need special training to wear it. It feels like you're carrying a Brahmin on your back, but it can take a heck of a lot of punishment.
So there is a lore reasoning for it to exist. but there also isn't, as we've seen for 1, 2, 4, and 76. I compared it to driving a car. It's complicated, but in theory, anybody could drive a car without an instructor, if given enough time to learn how to operate it. It's a skill. Which brings me to this idea, left by a few commenters with either the same or similar ideas. Namely from Viper, he suggested having it return, but as a skill or a perk. I say skills, as that would be an excuse for skills to come back. So yeah, a low skill power armor user can use it, but they'd be incredibly slow, lumbering mess. Slower animation, not just from walking, but also drawing your weapon and possibly using it. You still got all the defensive capabilities, sure, but it's so hard to use it's almost a hindrance. You're just so terribly slow. But as you get skilled with it, and yes, even possibly receive power armor training from somewhere, which will give you a massive buff in the skill count, like 20 to 30 points worth, you become more efficient, and possibly unlock power armor specific perks from higher skills. And to not let it be an easy dump a bunch of skill points into the power armor section and get it early, perhaps the power armor skill is so special that it eats up skill points, like maybe 5 points of skill points are needed to make a single skill point in the power armor skill. It'll make a lot of players want to seek out the training. And maybe training also removes the 5 to 1 point issue, meaning an early adopter really did waste their points. It's not easy to use power armor without training, but it can be done. And using it at a low skill can be a real problem, almost a liability, making a player think perhaps I should just use combat armor for now. I don't know, I like this idea. I think it works well. After all, we have, or at least had skills to use a variety of weapon. Why not for power armor too?